Much that once was is lost.
With that being all copyright will allow, I'll take it from here. So the downtown Abbey sounding wannabe tells us that a very nice chap called Sharon made a bunch of rings and gave these rings to the races of mini-me's, knock-off falcons, and hairless apes. But he kept one fancy ring for himself. All the other races got pissy over this and declared war with Sharon. I think we can all agree this was a bit of an overreaction for a piece of jewellery. One of the hairless apes takes the ring from Sharon's corpse, and instead of destroying it as agreed, he keeps the fancy ring for himself. Unfortunately, forgetting Karma's a bitch, and on the journey home takes more goblin shafts than a porn star, ending up floating lifeless down a river, angering local fishermen, and worse, loses the fancy ring. Some time later, a stunted albino zombie finds the ring and plays with it for centuries, showing us just how boring Middle Earth really is. Then it slips off his, and I really want to say finger here, and is nicked by a hobbit. A race that loves to eat, drink, sleep, and do the least amount of work possible. So basically, your average Twitch streamer. Then everyone chooses not to write anything down and promptly forgets all about the war for the fancy ring, which is exactly the same thing that happened to Game of Thrones fans after watching season 8. Now, in present day, we're introduced to Frodo, Bilbo's live in houseboy, and a boomer pothead called Gandalf who likes hanging out with hobbits because they're the perfect height. We are shown the Shire filled with jolly folk who never gained the grand mysterious knowledge known as footwear. Gandalf meets up with his old mate Bilbo, and of course, the first thing they do is light up and get lit. Bilbo tells Gandalf that he wants to go on another adventure at 111 years old, which is impressive considering he doesn't even own a mobility scooter. That night at the party, Bilbo uses his ring to disappear, which confuses the hobbits, which isn't that hard considering they've just been had by a bad riddle and a firework. Back at the house, Bilbo is leaving but doesn't want to part with his ring and tries flaxing on Gandalf, right up until Gandalf puffs out his chest and does his best Bran Blasted impression, leaving Bilbo no choice but to drop the ring on the floor in a huff, and with a great need to change his underwear, leaves the house. Frodo staggers in and sees Bilbo's ring on the floor, which is a surprise, and Gandalf muttering to himself, which isn't. After getting Frodo's promise to hide Bilbo's ring, Gandalf charges off into the night, leaving Frodo thinking Gandalf's just had a senior moment and there's a good chance he's in possession of stolen goods. We see an emo Dracula's castle where we hear Gollum scream, Baggins! Shire! Pineapples! Because everyone has to have a safe word. After which, a group of goth knights ride from the castle hoping to make last call. Gandalf rides to a peaceful white city to do some research in the library filled with books and parchment. So he does what anyone would do while surrounded by flammable materials, lights up and gets lit. Back at the Shire, Frodo comes home from another night drinking and is startled to find a tweaking Gandalf in his house, who obviously has been in Frodo's mushroom stash. And then Gandalf throws the ring in the fire and asks Frodo to hold it. Now, due to a night's drinking and weed intake, Frodo takes the ring out of the fire and sees some funny words on it. This freaks Gandalf out even more, and he starts raving about Sharon's fancy ring, the end of the world, and doing something with some Welsh bird. Though after a few puffs of his pipe, Gandalf calms down and explains to Frodo how much shit they're all in, and he's going to have to take the ring and meet him in Bree at the Prancing Pony. Even though Frodo thinks a strip club is a strange place to meet, he agrees to take the ring there. Before Frodo can leave, Master Peeping Tom Sam is caught by Gandalf and is forced into accompanying Frodo. Of course, Gandalf doesn't care that while gone on this unwanted trip, Sam's gardening business will go under, squatters will steal his house, and his chances of betting Rosie will be zero. I'm starting to think Gandalf might be a bit of a prick. See Frodo and Sam start out on their enforced march. Sam tells us this is the furthest he's walked in his life. Considering his ample frame, this is not surprising. They then camp for the night, and to no one's surprise, they get stoned. Gandalf meets up with his boss, another boomer called Saruman, who immediately berates Gandalf for being a vagabond drug fiend. After they've had a chat about the magic crystal ball, for the second time in a year, Christopher Lee turns to the dark side. We then get a truly legendary battle of the ages between two centuries old geriatrics as they try their best to copy the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, but end up recreating a Family Guy scene between Herbert and Hans. We return to Frodo and Sam, who are joined on their journey by two delinquent thieves called Merry and Pippin, who are trying to outrun the scythe carrying victim of their pilfering. And to no one's surprise, they are also potheads. While the foursome are picking some shrooms, a goth knight appears and they hide. While hiding, Frodo is overcome with a desire to finger his ring. Before he can do so, Sam throws a bag of veggies a few feet away, which distracts the goth knight. Then, somehow, with the shortest legs of any race, the group avoids the goth knights on horseback right up until night time. Now, I'm not saying this is a bit of an issue, but someone may want to inform Mr. Jackson. But the group do escape by using a ferry, which Frodo leaps onto in dramatic fashion. Or it would be dramatic fashion, but for the fact once you take into account a hobbit's size, the large gap he jumped was about a foot and a half. I'm going to pause here so Lord of the Rings fans can scold me in the comments. The group arrive at Bree, and through a glory hole they convince the gate guard to let them in. They enter the prancing pony, and after lying about their age, they sit down to eat. Unfortunately, Pippin is a mouthy drunk and tells all to anyone who will listen. Frodo makes for Pippin to give him a slap, but gets bumped into, and with odds greater than toast landing jam side up, Frodo's finger slips into his ring not only in front of the patrons, but also a mysterious stranger. And there's your tip for the day, everybody. Don't finger your ring in front of strangers. The stranger grabs Frodo and takes him to his room, but before he can do anything, Sam and the delinquents show up and threaten the stranger, who is 3 times their size, holding a sword, twice their size. So say what you want about hobbits, but they always got a bro's back. Unfortunately for the gate guard, just 3 days for retirement, the goth knights turn him into a new flavoured pancake, and they didn't even have the decency to knock. It turns out the stranger is a ranger called Danger. I'm kidding. Of course, his real name's Shirley. And he explains that the Goth Knights used to be Disney executives before the rings drove them mad. Now they're undead ghouls damned to an eternity of searching for Sharon's fancy ring. The next morning, our valiant group heads out on their way to Ravendale, home of the upper class twats who larp as owls. On the way there, we learn about the Hobbit's culinary schedule. Just 9 meals a day. So, between overdrinking, overeating, and overdosing, I think we can all understand why hobbits became extinct. After rubbing his crystal ball, Saruman hears the voices in his head telling him to build an army by next Tuesday. Now, Saruman may have misinterpreted the voices as instead of starting a recruitment drive, Saruman has his minions dig a really big hole in the ground and chop down a forest. I can already see the hashtags. Evil white man uses slave race to destroy indigenous forest. Needless to say, Saruman will have to avoid Twitter for a while. The group are staying the night on a hill that looks like a giant mushroom, which may be the reason that they decide to have a fry up. I'm actually with them on this one, and my defense for it is bacon. The fry does lead to them being found and attacked by the Goth Knights, and though Frodo slips his finger into Sharon's fancy ring, he still gets stabbed, making Frodo question his life choices. Then Strider jumps in, swinging his weapon everywhere while being quite the pyromaniac, which makes the Goth Knights all run away. Strider inspects Frodo's wound and the weapon and concludes it's a poisoned blade from a premium mob pack, and reassures Frodo he's going to be perfectly fine as long as he doesn't die. As Strider and Sam are looking for even more weed, an elven thought, who just so happens to be Strider's Yandere girl, named Arwen, grabs Frodo and scoppers into the night, which turns immediately into day for some reason. The Goth Knights chase Arwen for several minutes of runtime as Frodo slowly changes into your local meth head. We then see Gandalf capture a moth and speak to it, proving Middle-earth weed is indeed of legendary quality, as he's still high days after his last hit. Saruman then welcomes his chosen son into the world, and I truly do not want to know how his seed got into the ground. Uh, Hang on a minute, I think I've got a couple of scenes mixed up here. Maybe I too should lay off the pipe a bit. After crossing a stream, Arwen waves her magic sword in the air while chanting or complaining. It's hard to tell with women. Either way, as the Goth Knights are crossing the stream, they are swept away by a massive flood. And we won't mention that a few miles downstream, a village no longer exists. Frodo wakes up from his tripping dream to find a creepy Gandalf watching him sleep and wondering who exactly changed his clothes. Gandalf then explains he didn't meet the group because Saruman trapped him like Rapunzel and that he escaped using a giant eagle. Though considering how much weed he smokes, this version of events is highly suspect. Gandalf then introduces the other creepy guy watching Frodo sleep, and he is Elrod, the leader of the elves, even if he does look like a bit of a twat. Frodo meets up with the rest of the K-pop group, and they laugh and hug and happily pretend they didn't almost die on their trip, denial being the spice of life. Frodo then embraces a boomer Bilbo, who tells Frodo he's writing a book about his adventures. Well, except all the times he used the ring to spy on the ladies of Mirkwood and Laketown while they bathed. Sam and Frodo agree they did their part, so it's time to get paid and get gone. In a private meeting, Elrod informs Gandalf that he and his lot are doing a runner, but wishes Gandalf well with the end of the world business. And Gandalf is rightly miffed at Elrod, but says he will put his faith in the Chads. Elrod then goes into a long flashback as to why, back in his day, the Chads failed because they were cooked by Sharn's ring. But here's the thing, only Elrod and King Cook were in the volcano. All Elrod had to do was shove King Cook in and job done. So a solid case can be made that Elrod is as much to blame as anyone for the coming apocalypse, which is probably why he's pissing off to another country before someone puts two and two together. Git. We have a romantic scene where the Welsh thought tries to get Chad Strider to wear her promised necklace, and one puppy dog look later, and Strider's on the leash. We see our heroes arrive: Boromir, the Chad for all seasons, Gimli, who has never used shampoo in his life, and Legolas, who uses shampoo and conditioner because he's worth it. At the round table meeting of the Middle Earth Homeowners Association, Elrod explains that the fancy ring must be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom. Tolkien really must have spent time coming up with that name. Then, even though Elrod has just said fire is needed to destroy the ring, Gimli hits it with his axe, which is why he won't be entrusted with anything more above collecting firewood for the rest of the journey. We then get the meme of memes from Boromir, and no one takes his warning seriously, even though he does turn out to be correct. Then everyone starts yelling and yapping about not wanting to take the ring, but also not wanting anyone else to take the ring, which is a perfect example of how politicians constantly fail at doing anything. After about an hour of the boomers yapping and carrying on, Frodo says he will take the ring to Mordor, not because he wants to, but because Star Trek The Voyage Home is on in 7 minutes, and it's the only way to shut them up. And with that, Frodo is joined by Gandalf, the homeless pothead, Strider, who seems to have a death wish, Legolas, who has a thing for Strider and scented soaps, Gimli, who's only slightly smarter than a cabbage, Boromir, who may be bipolar, Sam in the hope of finally getting paid, and Merry and Pippin, who are unsure even where they are, let alone what's actually going on. I think we can all agree with this is a eclectic group. Things are just going to go swimmingly. And with that, Elrod declares them the Expendables and they all break for lunch. After lunch, Frodo goes to see Boomer Bilbo, who gives him a shiny new vest and encourages Frodo to change in front of him. Then Bilbo sees Frodo's ring and tries to pounce on it, but Frodo catches him in the act, so Boomer Bilbo plays it off as a senior moment, and Frodo tells Bilbo not to worry about it, but makes a hasty exit just in case. We see our vigilant questers walking across Folly Hill and Dale, which is strange considering they all arrived at Rivendell on horses, but chose to leave them behind and walk. I don't care if it's Tolkien or Jackson, this is just daft. And again, pausing for insightful comments. Anywho, they stop for lunch on a scenic crag. Boromir teaches Merry and Pippin some karate. Frodo and Sam have a fry. Nice. Legolas stands on a boulder, feeling in the wind through his hair, and everyone else is puffing on their pipes, keeping that evil thing called reality away. Then a flock of crows fly towards the group, who all decide to do their best Bush and Rocks impression. After the crows have left, we start to see evidence that Gandalf should never have been put in charge of the group, as not only did this master wizard choose not to use horses, he also chose not to cast Firestorm at the crows. But then, maybe due to his years of substance abuse, he chooses to lead the group over a freaking snow covered mountain. I mean, come on. So, halfway up this mountain, Frodo drops the ring and Boromir gives us an insightful thought for the day, while Strider tries not to cut his head off. Time for someone to switch to decaf. Unsurprisingly, further up the mountain, they are caught in a massive blizzard. Then Gandalf shouts and raves at the sky for a while, which causes an avalanche, almost killing the entire group, and yet he still refuses to leave the fucking mountain. Thankfully, Frodo and the group vote to flee an icy death. So, after weeks of pointless travelling up and down a mountain, with Gandalf sulking all the way because he didn't get his way, they reach the doorway to the mines of Moria with great relief, only to find out that Gimli and Gandalf, who have been here many times before, don't even know how to open the bloody door. Then Merry and Pippin awaken a giant kraken. How such a creature made its way to and survived in such a small pond, I guess we'll never know. Frodo comes up with the solution to the door puzzle and they all charge inside only to be met by a collection of dwarf skeletons. Instantly regretting this decision, they try to leave, but the overly helpful Kraken has already closed the entrance, leaving the entire group wishing again they had just stuck to the main fucking road. After rambling around in the mines for a day or two, they come to a fork in the road, and again neither Gimli nor Gandalf know which way to go. So they follow their group's motto: when in doubt, smoke it out. We get a beautiful and awe inspiring view of the dwarfs' craftsmanship, and while I'm not saying they're overcompensating, that they're overcompensating. The group then find the tomb and grave of Gimli's cousin, King Balin, which brings up an issue or two which is sure to annoy any Lord of the Rings fans still watching this. Now, if the war with the goblins was going on for so long they had time to bury King Balin, why didn't any of them leave to get help or just escape the mines entirely? Apparently, the dwarves didn't know how to open the front door either. Pippin accidentally makes a bit of noise, which alerts the goblins there's trespassers about, and Gandalf tells Pippin to go kill himself, which, let's be honest, is quite rich coming from Gandalf, who conned Frodo into taking the ring in the first place, forced Sam to accompany Frodo against his will, led the group up a mountain, almost getting them all killed, keeps getting lost, having memory lapses due to constant drug use, and chooses to read a diary in the middle of enemy territory. I think we all know who the real liability to this group is. Yeah, the twat in the big grey hat. A few minutes later, the goblin squatters show up demanding free Wi-Fi, and violence ensues. Ensues. During the battle, we learn three things. One, always have homeowners insurance protecting against damage done by squatters. Two, the deadliest weapon against goblins is apparently a frying pan. And three, not only does mithril protect against cuts and slashes, but also negates the physics of force and reorganizes internal organs to prevent damage, while getting stabbed by a spear wielding albino Hulk. I would pause here to let Lord of the Rings fans write me a 7-page essay on the properties of mithril, but let's be honest, they've already disliked the video and buggered off. An exciting chase scene later, and we're introduced to the Balrog, a truly cultural, fear inspiring creature, which is why the group made a strategic relocation. Once everybody has crossed the tiny bridge built for dwarfs, Gandalf decides to face off with the Balrog by creating the second most famous Lord of the Ring meme. Gandalf slams the staff into the tiny bridge, cracking it, so it will collapse under the Balrog's weight. Of course, for everyone whose mind isn't drug addled, you would have understood that even without Gandalf's small crack, the bridge would still have given way with the weight of the Balrog. And even if it didn't, can you imagine the Balrog trying to tightrope walk across the tiny bridge? He is falling no matter what, making Gandalf's actions redundant. After watching this scene where Gandalf falls, many people will be grieving for his loss. But based on his performance up to this point, I say good riddance. Our crew make it to Lorien Forest Lothlorien Forest. I'm terribly sorry I got that pronunciation wrong. And while Gimli is boasting of his prowess as a ninja, they are captured by some snooty owls. They are taken before the king, who speaks as if he's got something pointy wedged right up his ass, and the queen, who Jedi mind tricks them all, which leaves Boromir looking sheepish as he may have been having certain thoughts involving Lady Galadriel and a bottle of custard. We have a very touching scene between Strider and Boromir where they become bros for life. Lady Galadriel then suggestively leads a young impressionable Frodo to a secluded grove and whispers softly to come closer, and he does. Then she scares the piss out of him by turning into a giant lich queen, vying to destroy the whole world, then returns to normal and walks away smugly, leaving poor Frodo feeling unnerved, confused, and smelling of his own piss. We see Saruman standing on his balcony doing his best impression of a failed Austrian painter, proclaiming to his army of Uruk-hai, or his children, or both, that the races of men, elves, and dwarves are all evil because they keep orcs and goblins from using disabled parking. They drive orcs and goblins off their land so they can grow more weed, and they even went as far as to cancel a town called Eureka. Then there's something about a 1,000-year dike and a final revolution. When the speech is over, the Uruk-hai roar in unison, then charge out of the hole to make the Vikings look like Care Bears. As the crew is ready to leave Lothlorien, Lady Gabriel gives them all special capes, good luck charms of questionable quality like hair to Gimli, an elven bow to an elf, and a ton of stale bread no bugger would buy. She could at least have given them some holy hand grenades. After an undetermined amount of time canoeing on a gentle river, I would like to tell you exactly how long, but considering the crew went from a mountain to a mine in one scene, who knows? Anyway, they come across two huge statues gesturing for them to go no further. So, of course, our crack team of adventurers completely ignore these warnings and paddle on without a care in the world. Apparently, ignorance is bliss. They make camp on the shore of the riverside beside a massive waterfall. I wonder, could this have been what the giant crossing guards were warning about? As Frodo is trying to find a quiet place to take a dump, Boromir has a moment of weakness and lashes out at Frodo for eating the last sausage roll. So instead of coming up with a good lie or admitting the truth, Frodo chooses to leg it, thus proving his guilt in the sausage roll matter. In desperation, Frodo tries pawning the ring off onto Strider. Thankfully, he's not daft enough to take it. Strider then shoos Frodo away, and in a true display of military genius, decides to solo attack the Urukant army. Boromir courageously defends Merry and Pippin while blowing a dainty tune on his horn. But then Saruman's number one son shows up and somehow, while using a thrift store bow in the worst way possible, is still able to hit Boromir. But Boromir takes the hit like a true Chad and keeps killing the enemy while Merry and Pippin help by throwing stones. Then, after taking several arrows everywhere but in the knee, Boromir goes down like the goat he always was, protesting the innocent stoners in both ways, who, unironically, get kidnapped anyway. Strider faces off against Saruman's retard son, who tries to Captain America Strider, but fails and loses an arm. Then tries to act tough by stabbing himself with Strider's sword, and yet seems generally surprised when Strider lops off his head. While all this commotion is going on, Gimli seems to have gotten lost in the forest, and Legolas is trying desperately not to muss up his hair. Strider and Boromir share their hopes and dreams for the future, and for their brodom which will live on into the next life, which is a very meaningful and touching moment, only then to be broken by Strider stealing Boromir's limited edition braziers from his still warm corpse. Frodo decides he's had enough of this motley crew and nicks a canoe and starts to cross the river, only for Sam, who must have been taking a nap this whole time, in an act of great loyalty and utter stupidity, waded into the river without the foggiest idea how to swim, and, shockingly, starts drowning. Thankfully, Frodo rescues Sam, if for no other reason that he's not going to be the one to be burdened lugging the supplies all the way to Mordor. After pitching Boromir's body off the waterfall in their last canoe, The three amigos decide to rescue Merry and Pippin by following the shoreline, only for an hour later to come across Bonomir's washed up body being eaten by rats. So after the Viking funeral failed, they try burying him instead. Sam and Frodo look out over the mountains and see Mordor and the active volcano, and desperately wish they'd never met Gandalf. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, part one of this trilogy. I hope you enjoyed it and will join me next time as we find out if Frodo and Sam will make it past border control, Merry and Pippin ever understand what exactly is going on, and will Strider, Legolas, and Gimli ever find the Holy Grail. Find out in the next exciting episode, same bat time, same bat channel.